All right, welcome to This Explainer. Today we're taking on a job that honestly strikes fear into the hearts of a lot of weekend DIYers, and that is servicing big blue water filters. But look, by the time we're done here, you're going to be able to approach this task with the absolute confidence of a veteran plumber giving a masterclass. We're talking no guesswork, no snapped wrenches, and absolutely no flooded utility rooms. So let's get straight to work. Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover the low pressure problem, safely relieving system pressure, cleaning the brass Y strainer, the big blue housing masterclass, the silicone grease secret, and finally, the pressure gauge pro tip. Section 1, the low pressure problem. Why is your shower just a trickle? You absolutely know this feeling. You step into the shower, you're ready to start your day, you turn that handle, and nothing but a sad, pathetic little trickle of water. It completely ruins your morning, right? You've got shampoo in your hair and barely enough water to rinse it out. Well, whether you're out in the suburbs on a deep well pulling up heavy sediment and iron, or you're tied into a city grid that occasionally flushes its mains and sends all this grit down the line, a sudden dramatic drop in your whole house pressure almost always points to one very specific culprit. Your mechanical water filter is totally choked out. It has basically absorbed all the punishment it can take, and now it's acting like a giant cork in your plumbing system. Now, we know exactly why you've been putting this maintenance off. The fear is incredibly real. You're standing down there in the basement, staring at those massive blue cylinders, literally terrified of snapping that cheap plastic wrench right in half. Or, honestly, even worse, you're afraid of pinching a rubber O-ring, threading the whole thing back together, and turning the water back on, only to watch a catastrophic geyser erupt all over your utility room floor. Nobody wants ruined drywall and soaked tools. It happens to people all the time. But if you stick with the exact framework we're about to lay out, we will completely eliminate those risks. You are going to have total control over this situation. Moving on to Section 2, safely relieving system pressure, which is the golden rule of plumbing. Okay, before you even think about touching a wrench, you have to obey the ultimate golden rule. You can never, ever fight a pressurized system. The water will win every single time. So here are your steps. First, turn your bypass valves to completely isolate the filter block from your home's main water line. Second, go open a nearby sink faucet just to give the trapped water somewhere to escape. And finally, press that little red pressure relief button right on top of the filter housing. Do not skip this sequence. If you try to force things while the system is locked up with trapped pressure, you risk this nasty phenomenon known as water hammer. That is a violent, rapid shockwave of water that literally bangs through your plumbing, and it can actually shatter your PVC pipes or blow out your downstream fittings. And relieving that pressure, it isn't just a safety precaution. It fundamentally changes the physical dynamics of the housing itself. Think about it. If you've ever strained a shoulder or thrown out your back trying to muscle one of these filter caps off, you were probably fighting 60 psi of trapped static water pressure pushing relentlessly against those threads. It binds the plastic together like sugar glue. But when you bleed that static pressure off completely using that red button, the housing mechanically becomes 10 times easier to break loose. You essentially stop fighting the water and you start working the mechanics. Section 3, cleaning the brass Y strainer. This is your first line of defense. Following the water's path into your home, the very first thing you usually hit is a small, heavy brass fitting called a Y strainer. Inside this thing is a 100-micron stainless steel mesh. You can think of it as the bouncer for your plumbing system. It catches all the really large, abrasive debris. We're talking heavy sand, chunks of scale, hard grit, before it can barrel down the line and totally shred your expensive main filters. To clean it, just take your wrench, gently back off the cap, pull out that metal mesh, and thoroughly wash it under a tap until it's perfectly clear. But listen up, because here is a critical failure point for most DIYers. Always, always inspect the white Teflon seal before you thread it back together. If that seal is deformed or pinched or somehow missing, it is going to drip continuously. Make sure it's seated flat and flush. Section 4, the Big Blue Housing Masterclass. Let's conquer the BB20. All right, we've reached the main event, actually cracking open those heavy Big Blue 20 housings. Now, the absolute biggest rookie mistake happens when you're putting these things back together. People drop in a fresh, clean filter, grab that plastic wrench, and just crank down on the housing with maximum gorilla strength. When you do that, you are practically guaranteeing that the plastic threads will seize up solid over the next few months as the system pressurizes and the room temperature fluctuates. You're just setting yourself up for a nightmare next time you have to change it. So what's the veteran rule? You thread it up so it is just hand tight, and then you give it a tiny, gentle quarter turn with the wrench just to snug the O-ring. Stop right there. That is literally all the pressure it needs. But what happens if the guy who owned the house before you over-tightened it, and now the thing is seized absolutely solid? Whatever you do, don't hang your entire body weight on that cheap plastic wrench. It's going to snap in half, and you'll be driving to the hardware store with no running water at home. Instead, you're going to use the veteran's rubber mallet trick. Slip the plastic wrench onto the bottom grooves of the housing. Now, while pressing down hard on that red relief valve to allow air into the chamber, gently tap the side of the wrench handle with a rubber mallet. Just tap, tap, tap. That sudden, sharp vibration, combined with breaking the vacuum seal by letting the air in, will mechanically shock those seized threads loose. It honestly works like magic, and the housing will usually just spin right off in your hands. Section 5. The silicone grease secret. Why do filters leak? Picture this absolute nightmare scenario for a second. You followed the steps, you successfully rustled the heavy housing off, dumped the nasty water out, dropped in a crisp, clean white filter cartridge, and screwed the housing back on. You step back, slowly open the bypass valves to turn the water back on, and water just aggressively sprays absolutely everywhere. It's shooting across the room, pooling around the floor drain. Why does this happen? Well, leaks almost exclusively occur because a dry rubber O-ring, that really thick black rubber gasket sitting right in the groove of the housing, gets pinched, stretched, or twisted completely out of its track when you screw the cap back on. So how do we stop these leaks permanently? It all comes down to the exact compound you put on that black O-ring. Never ever use petroleum jelly or standard automotive greases. From a chemical standpoint, petroleum physically degrades and eats raw rubber over time. It breaks down the molecular bonds, turning that crucial O-ring into this sticky, gummy mess that catches, stretches, and eventually pinches when you screw the housing on. The real masterclass secret of the trade is 100% food-grade silicone grease. Every single time you service the unit, wipe the O-ring completely clean of any old grit with a paper towel. Then, apply a very thin, even sheen of that silicone grease around the entire ring. The silicone protects the rubber, and it ensures the housing just glides into a flawless, watertight seal every single time you thread it on, with zero binding or catching. Section 6. The pressure gauge pro tip. It is time to stop guessing. To finish up this masterclass, let's move away from basic maintenance and get into pure optimization. Most homeowners just blindly guess when to change their filters, right? They throw away good money on cartridges that still have months of life left in them, or worse, they suffer through terrible low pressure for weeks because they just forgot to check. The ultimate plumbing system upgrade is installing 2 incredibly inexpensive pressure gauges directly into your line. You plumb 1 gauge in right before the water enters the housing and 1 gauge right after the water exits. This is a super cheap modification, but it gives you concrete, mathematical proof of exactly what is happening dynamically inside that filter at any given moment. And here is your magic number, 7. With water actively running somewhere in the house, say a bathtub or a heavy sink flow, walk downstairs and check those 2 gauges. If the first gauge is reading 50 psi and the second gauge is reading 43, meaning you have a pressure drop of exactly 7 psi, or about 0.5 bar, your cartridge is officially choked out with sediment. It's mechanically done. No more guessing, no more setting reminders on calendars. You only spend money on replacement filters exactly when the fluid mechanics demand it. It puts the control entirely back in your hands. So there you have it. You now possess the exact playbook to handle this job without that lingering, awful anxiety of flooding your basement. You know how to safely control the system pressure. You can use the mallet trick to defeat stubbornly seized threads. You know to protect your vital seals with silicone grease, and you can mathematically track your system's performance. So the real question is, are you going to keep suffering through those weak, frustrating showers every morning? Or are you ready to head down to your utility room right now and take absolute command of your home's plumbing? Thanks for joining this explainer. Go grab your wrench, and we'll see you next time.